Hi, my name is Lance Rafael Pancho and welcome to our presentation. First, let me introduce to you my members first.
Hi, my name is Jefferson C. Buay.
My name is John Daniel Del Monte.
I am Joanna May Escopete.
I'm Davis Guerra.
I am Precious Angel Manlangit.
I'm Arnia Natividad.
My name is Brent Gerard Tapia.
I'm Ronel P. Santiago.
And we are
Brute Force.
So, let's get started.
Hi, my name is Brent Gerard Tapia. For my part, I'll explain the subject class. In line 3 to 5, we declare that the program will accept an ID, the subject name, and their units. So, in line 7, as we can see, that the subject will have an ID, subject name, and what will be the units of will be inputted. And from line 13, it will get the value of ID, subject name, and the units.
Hi, my name is Jefferson C. Buay. And now, let us discuss what is about the student class. In this student class has a constructor, a class fields, a getter methods, and setter methods, and also a methods. And we are talking about first the class fields. First, in class field has an integer ID of the student, string first name of the student, string last name of the student, and string course for students. And now, let us discuss this line of code, the private list subject list of subjects. In this line of code, this is the list that we're going to use in store a data in subject in order to add a more subject. And this list has a object named subject, which is the subject class. And let's move on. When it comes to private access modifier, the methods or the data members declared as private are accessible only within the class, and which they are declared in other classes of the same package, and it will not able to access these members. And now let's move on to the constructor. We have a default constructor here to get all the data we wanted to use as a default. And the second one is we have a parameterized constructor which has a parameter integer ID, string first name, string last name, and string course. In this constructor has a ID that collect the data of in the parameterized constructor to use to our main method. For example, this ID is equals to ID. First name is equals to first name. The last name and equals to last name. This course is equals to course. And lastly, the list of objects, new array list in the subjects. And as you can see, in the right side of the equal sign, it is a parameter in the parameters constructor and not in our class fields. And now we have also here the getter method get ID to get the ID to get the value of the ID. And we also have a string get first name to get the first name, and string get last name to get the last name. And we also have the public string get course to return the course of the data. And also we have the list of subject in order to get the list of the objects. And now let's move on to the methods we are going to use in these students classes. The public void in list subject, which is has a parameter subject sub. In this method, are going to check if the subject is already exists. Else, if there's not existed, This list of object or our list add the parameter size subject sub.
Hi, I'm Ronel T. Santiago from the College of Computing and Engineering to CSA. In this part of a student class, we create a method named remove by subject ID. Using this composition, we create a method for remove a subject by using the subject ID. That's why we input integer subject ID into this method to remove a subject from the list of subjects field. And the program will know if the subject does not exist or not. And if you already remove the subject, the output will show subject successfully removed. But if the subject you want to remove doesn't exist on the list, the output will show subject does not exist. Next method is the display details method. In this method, the program print the student ID, full name of the student, and its course. Next method is the display subject methods. It is the iterating to every instance of subject class to display the student currently in list or enrolled. It will display the subject ID in the name of subject or else it's none. And the last method of this student class is the boolean has subject of. It will check if they have an existing subject inside the list that exists and the subject ID accepts as a parameter.
Hi, my name is Lance Rafael Pancho and I'll be covering the methods used in the main class. So starting off with the instruction method. So here, we just simply display a 10 lines of message to inform the user for the action. So next is the getStudentById function, which return a student object and accepts a parameter of student ID. Inside, we have a for each loop which iterates all student object inside the list of student. Inside the for each loop, it has an if statement which check if the student ID matches with the ID assigned to the student object. Once this condition becomes true, we will just return the student object. Else, when the iteration completes without triggering the if block, we will just show a message informing the user that the student ID is not found and return null. Next is the getSubjectById function, which return a subject object and accepts a parameter subject ID. Inside, it is the same with the getStudentID function. First, we use the for each to iterate for each subject in the list of subjects. Inside, we have a if statement which checks if the subject ID matches with the ID assigned to the subject object. If the condition becomes true, we will just return the subject. Else, we will inform the user that the subject does not exist and we just simply return null. Also, we have a show list of subject method. Inside, we display a message of available subject. Also, we have a for each loop to iterate for each subject available in the list of subject. Each iteration, we just simply display a message contained with the subject ID and the subject name of that subject. So the last method is display_studs that as subject of method or display_students that as subject of method. This method will determine if the student have the specific subject ID enlisted to it. The method has a parameter of subject ID which is required for navigating the subject enlisted to the student. Inside the method, we have a for each loop that will iterate to each student in the list of student. And inside the loop, we have a if block that will check if the student have an enlisted subject relating to its subject ID. When this condition is true, we just call a method of a student object to display the information with the enlisted subjects.
Hello, my name is Heidi Lorraine Ico. I'm here to explain to you the case 1 and case 2. Regarding to the first case, if the user enters 1, a new student object will be created. But prior to adding the new student object, the program will ask for the first name, and then the last name, and then the course to be added. Subsequently, a reader will read the inputted values for the new object. Thus, there is a student ID increment. Onwards, we have to check, or the program has to check, if the new instance of student already exists in the list. So we have here using for loop to review its elements inside the list, and a condition if the returned first name or last name matches the new student's object's first name and last name. And here we have another if condition if the new student doesn't exist in the list and therefore will add the new student in it. And regarding to the second case or case 2, where a new instance of subject class will be created by the user. Prior, the program will ask for the subject name and the subject units. After that, there's an increment for the subject ID. Onwards, the program will check to see if the subject or new subject exists in the list using a for loop and a condition if the returned subject name matches the new subject object's name. Another if condition is present to add the new subject if it doesn't exist in the list.
Hello, I am Arniel Tividad and I will present the menu case number 3 and 4, which is enlisting a subject and removing a subject from student. Now, the user should input number 3 in order to enlist a subject to student. After that, the available list of subjects will display and the user should enter an existing student by ID. And you need to choose in the list and enter. And there is a enlist subject method that accepts subject type of data as parameter. Then it will add subject to list of subjects of the selected student. And if I enter student ID that did not exist, it will print student does not exist. Also, if I enter subject ID that did not exist, it will print subject does not exist. Next is removing a subject from a student. First, you need to enter number 4. Then, you need to enter student and subject ID. If student or subject that you've entered is not in the list, it will print student or subject does not exist. And if you enter student ID and subject ID that exists in the list, the subject that you've entered will remove from the details of the student.
Case 5. When the user enters 5 as an input, the program will prompt the user for a valid student ID. Then the program will display the data of the student who have the student ID supplied by the user. We constructed the getStudentById method, which returns the student class instance, and we utilize the displayDetails method from the student class object to display all of the student's details. Case 6. Iterating through all instances of the student class that are stored within the list of students and printing the details of each student using the displayDetails method. Case 7. The program will prompt the user to enter a valid subject ID, and then using the display students that has subject of method, which accept a subject ID as an argument, it will print all of the details for the students enrolled in the object subject class who have been retrieved using the subject ID specified by the user.
Good day, Sir Janus. I am Precious Angel Manlangit, and I will present the first half of the demonstration of our program. As we run our program, the main menu will appear wherein there are 8 options available for the user. First option, as we enter number 1, is the Create New Student Record. So first, we will input the first name of the new student, then the last name, and their course. After adding it successfully, we are now back to the main menu. So for the second option, create new subject record, we will first input the name of the new subject, then its units. Back to the main menu again, that means it was successfully added. The third option is to enlist a subject to a student. It will show first the list of available subjects and you can select them with their ID. So first, we must enter the student ID, then enter the subject ID. So now we will just enlist more students to other subjects as well. So for student number 1, game concept. Student number 1 again, enlist to PE. Then student number 2 for PE. Student number 3 for PE also. For student number 4, readings in Philippine history. Student number 4 again, object oriented. And then student number 4 for game concept. Student number 4 for PE. If we try to enlist a subject that is already enrolled in the student, the program will prevent having duplicate subjects and just return a statement of subject already exists. Now for the fourth option, which is remove a subject from a student, first we will enter the subject ID, then the subject ID you want to remove. There it is successfully removed.
Good day, Sir Janus. I am Joanna May Escopete and I am here to demo our program and how it works. So as the continuation of demonstration of Miss Manlangit, let's proceed. So if the user's input is equals to 5, the program will display the details of a particular students, which are ID, full name, course, and also the subject currently enrolled. But before that, the program will ask the user to input the ID of the student. So let's see. Let's say student ID number 4. Program will show you the details of the student who owns the ID number 4. So here, if the user's input is equals to 6, the program display all the details of all students, which are the ID, full name, course, and the subject currently enrolled of all students who are listed. So let's see. Number 4. As you can see in my screen, you will see all the details of the student. Else, if the user's input is equals to 7, the program will display all student details enlisted in a selected subject. But before that, the program will ask the user to input the subject ID to see the students enrolled in the subject selected by the user. So let's see. Let's say subject ID number 4. As you can see in my screen, subject ID number 4 is physical education. So all of student here in the screen are those who are taking the subject of the physical education. So if the user input number 8, the program will exit or will stop. That's all.
Hi, I'm Davis Guerra and I'm here to explain our omelet class diagram. We have student class and subject class. In student class, the private class fields are the ID, first name, last name, course, and list of subject. The data type for ID is int. For first name, last name, and course is string. This class has student default constructor and student parameterized constructor which accept values for ID, first name, last name, and course. This class has 5 methods: the public and list subject, the public remove subject by ID, the public display details, the public display subjects, and the public cast subject of. And all of these method, the return type is void. The type of class relationship for these classes is association, which represented by the straight line in the middle of this diagram. And the multiplicity of this diagram is 0, which indicates that 0 or more entity type instance exists at the association end. And for the subject class, the private class fields are the ID, subject name, unit, and the data type for ID and units is int. And for subject name is string. This class has subject default constructor and subject parameterized constructor which accept values for ID, subject name, and units. That's all, and thank you.